career and media career all time, he'd be on it. Probably top 10, maybe even higher. From an NFL MVP, having called more Super Bowls than anyone in history, to a dominant morning talk show in New York, Boomer Esiason has had a run. Get into all that with Boomer. As you are, Boomer, the main event. Thanks for joining us.
My pleasure, Andrew. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate all those nice things you just said, because I'm sure you've heard a lot of bad things about us.
Turn right. Then turn right. Turn right on the Commons Parkway. Then turn right on the Station Boulevard.
We first started at WMA, and here we are some 18 years later, which is amazing.
I probably would have written bad things. At that point, I was at ESPN.
In a quarter of a mile. Make a U-turn on turnaround.
Probably would have written bad things. At that point, I was at ESPN, so I don't think I did when Ives left and you came in. So I kind of missed that time. But then I think I made up for it, especially with Craig when I came back.
Yes, you did.
That might be...
Make a U-turn on turnaround.
Yes, you did.
That might be Craig's doing.
Well, it's all part of the shtick, I guess. It's all part and parcel to being in media and being a lightning rod.
Continue straight for 8 minutes to I-30 West, toward Dallas.
In media and being a lightning rod, which Craig certainly was, and Gio certainly is. So when you work with guys like that have very powerful opinions, even though that Craig 90% of the time was wrong, it makes for a very interesting fodder in the newspaper for sure.
100%. All right, so listen to the whole podcast. So work with WSC Sports to automate vertical video style content directly. Go and Google WSC Sports, go to the right-hand corner and tell them Marchand sent you. Boomer, when we go back in your career, I grew up, you're kind of in my prime, you, Dan Marino, Elway, that class. Younger viewers and listeners may not realize how great a player you were, probably borderline. I had Chase McCourty on a couple weeks ago where I said he wasn't a Hall of Famer, and then, he's had a great career. Borderline, could have, if you won a Super Bowl, maybe you get in there, but MVP, great career. My question for you to start off is, you're kind of a little bit ahead of your time. Frank Gifford, others, of course, have done it, but you went right from the playing field to the #1 booth, ABC, Al Michaels. How did that happen?
Well, it was interesting. In the early 90s, I took a job with USA Network in the offseason covering the World League of American Football. And back then, I think it was me, Dan Marino, and Warren Moon were all doing that in the offseason. So that's where I got to meet Craig Janoff and Kenny Waltz, the director and producer of Monday Night Football. Now, they had been covering me, of course, because we were one of the more popular teams in the 80s. And I became really close friends with them. And I did 2 years with them on USA Network. It was a Monday night game. Most of the times we found ourselves down in Birmingham or San Antonio. But I would say that it was the same format as Monday Night Football. So they saw me. I was working with Brad Nessler back in the day. And our sideline reporter was a guy by the name of Michael Barkan out of Philadelphia. So we had a really great booth. We had a lot of fun. We did 20 games together. I think we did some playoffs as well. So those guys saw me in the early 90s, and they felt really comfortable with me. So when it came time for me to retire, which they thought was going to be after the 96 season, they did offer me the job back then. I said, no, I wanted to go back and play one more year. And then after my 1997 final season in Cincinnati, they finally came to me and said, if you don't take it now, we're going to move on. And I felt like at the age of 37, I've accomplished pretty much everything I could in the NFL except winning the Super Bowl, that I would take a job that I thought would last 25 years. And lo and behold, little did I know it was going to last only 2 years.
Give us a little taste working with Al Michaels. What was that like for you, and how'd that go?
So when I first started, I was with Dan Theodore and Al Michaels, and I'll never forget doing that first Hall of Fame game with those guys. And Al Michaels walking out of the booth saying, this is going to be Emmy driven or Emmy winning or something. And I think he was really jacked up that I was in there, and I felt really good about it. And then at the end of that season, they unceremoniously let Dan Theodore go. And I remember there were some writings in the newspapers that somehow he and I weren't getting along. But in fact, nothing could be further from the truth. We actually played a lot of golf together on the road, dinner together on the road, and I was stunned that they were not bringing him back. And I remember throwing in a kind of like a wake party for Bowl in Honolulu that year because we would cover the Pro Bowl at ABC. So then the next year it was me, Al, and Leslie Visser. And I thought everything was going after the Super Bowl between the Titans and the Rams. So I was caught off guard, and I was a little shaken, to be honest with you.
So wait, Al Michaels didn't want you to mention Al Davis?
Al, Dan, and Frank had an issue with the Raiders. And I don't really know totally what the issue was, Andrew, but it was something really significant. That's all I can tell you. And I remember the next year, because I had taken the Westwood One radio job the next year doing Monday Night Football, so I was actually in the same stadiums with all the guys that fired me. And interestingly enough, Dennis Miller was added to the booth along with the great Dan Fouts. And I didn't have any axe to grind with those guys. They weren't after my job the year before. This came out of the blue that I ended up getting fired. And I remember seeing Dennis Miller at a game in Oakland, and he goes, "Man, whatever you told Al Davis about whatever happened in Denver, man, I thought that Al Michaels and Al Lopesalo, who was the PR guy for the Raiders at the time, were going to meet under the table to fight." And the way Dennis Miller told me that was hilarious. So, I mean, these are all things that you learn and you're young and you're not really aware of what's happening around you. And, you know, like I said, I got thrown right into that number one booth, which was unprecedented. But I have to say, it was well worth it, even though for I guess that last year was really rough, the second half of the season.
Well, that's why I give you a lot of credit, because you come out, you're kind of rookie of the year as a media person, and then you get punched in the face, knocked down, and you get back up, and you're here now to upgrade and listen to the rest of the podcast. AndrewMarchand.com, AndrewMarchand.com.
You can save every day by shopping at Whole Foods Market. Seriously, don't just go for their big...
In your hands are your hands. College football's never been better. Interest has never been higher. Believe that we are at the dawn of the golden age of college football. It was an epic day of college football. It was one of those days where you fall in love with the sport all over again. Hey, welcome into the program, everybody. This is the Joel Klatt Show, and I am Joel Klatt. We bring you into our studio here. We thank Hampton by Hilton. The show is brought to you by Hampton by Hilton, and we appreciate them for their support. And we have got the way too early top 10 for next season, 2025. And we've got it right here, hot up the presses right here. I've got it. Now, a couple of things that I want to get to before we jump into our 10-1 top 10 for next season. Number one is, wherever you're listening, please go rate and review us. And also, if you're not on YouTube, you really need to get over there and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thank you for those of you that have done that over the last week or so. We are now over 200,000, so that's a testament to all of you, all the college football fans that love to be in here and have enjoyed our show. I appreciate you. All of us appreciate you for consuming our product. Now, you're going to want to be over at YouTube, because next week we have a full week of YouTube exclusives. We will not be on audio. We will not be releasing an audio podcast next week. We're going to give the team a little bit of a break here after the season has finished up. And we're going to be releasing our 3 YouTube exclusive episodes of Understanding Football. Our schematic series drops on the 27th. Now, we've got 3 videos ready for you. We're going to start with our defensive coverages video, and then we're going to have a 2-part video of passing concepts, how to attack those coverages. And all of those are going to be released next week on YouTube. So you've got to get over there, subscribe, hit the notification button, and you'll...
In 1 mile, use the right lane to exit right to I-30 West toward Dallas. Then stay to the right.
Subscribe, hit the notification button, and you'll be there. So 27th, the coverages video, the 29th, passing concepts number 1, and the 30th, passing concepts number 2. So that's all coming up. Now, if you miss any of that, you can always go over to social media and follow us on social media, wherever you like the social media, at Joel Klatt Show is where we're at. Okay, let's get into this top 10, way too early top 10 for next season in 2025. I'm going to start by saying this is a very different operation than it has been in the last couple of years. Because for a long time in college football, you could basically just say like, oh, you know, pencil in, it's Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State, and maybe Clemson.
Exit right. Then use the right lane to stay to the right to I-30 West toward Dallas.
It's next week on YouTube, so you've got to get over there, subscribe, hit the notification button.
Use the right lane to stay to the right to I-30 West toward Dallas.
Be there. So 27th, the coverages video, the 29th, passing concepts number 1, and the 30th, passing concepts number 2. So that's all coming up. Now, if you miss any of that, you can always go over to social media and follow us on social media, wherever you like the social media, at Joel Klatt Show is where we're at. Okay, let's get into this top 10, way too early top 10 for next season in 2025. I'm going to start by saying this is a very different operation than it has been in the last couple of years. Because for a long time in college football, you could basically just say like, oh, you know, pencil in, it's Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State, and maybe Clemson, you know, and those were the teams, and you just throw some other teams in there. Texas is starting to get into that mix. And then there was a big drop off, and you could kind of say, like, and then between 5 and 9, it's kind of anybody's game. I think it's totally different now in college football, and I think it's a result of the transfer portal, yes, but more so, and more specifically, it's a result of name, image, and likeness. I think that more teams have invested in building out their roster. So what?
In 4.1 miles, take exit 56A, I-635 South, Lyndon B. Johnson Freeway. Estimated time in traffic, 7 minutes.
In building out their roster. So what I see now is that you've got a lot of teams that are very similar. Now, there are some teams that I'm going to put up at the top, but I don't think it's a drastic margin. It's not a huge margin between those teams and the teams that are going to be, 6 through 10. But here's the kicker. The difference between the teams that are like, let's say, 7 through 10 and 7 through 18, there's like no separation in those teams. I found this to be an incredibly difficult exercise because there are a ton of teams that I left off of this top 10 that very easily could be on the top 10. I get it, it's way too early, it's hard to tell. We still have another transfer portal window to go, so we don't even know the exact rosters that we're trying to evaluate here. But I just want that to frame the way that you're listening to the rest of this show and watching the rest of this show, is that we had more parity. We had more parity this season than we've ever had. And next season, I think it's going to be even more so a great amount of parity. So here are some teams that did not make my top 10 that I really struggled with and wanted to include, but didn't get a chance. BYU is one of those teams. Didn't make it. They could fall easily between that 7 to 18 range. Arizona State didn't make it, but again, they're sitting there. I love what Kenny Dillingham is doing, so they could easily fall in the top 10. Florida, the way that they finished their season, the hype surrounding DJ Lagway, and the way that he played late, I like Florida a lot. And they're not going to have that gauntlet that they technically had this last really good football team. Absolutely. Indiana likely is Illinois, and they've got a favorable schedule. So they didn't quite make my top 10, but very easily could. South Carolina is on that list. Alabama, I don't know what to do with Alabama right now. Who's their quarterback? What's the standard going to be under Kalen DeBoer? So all of those teams didn't quite make it, but very easily could have. And I can just hear and see some of the comments like, how in the world? All of them were close. All of them were close. I think any of them could have been included, and I would have not had a problem with it whatsoever. So those are the teams that didn't quite make it. So who did make our way too early top 10 for next season? Number 10, going to go with Michigan. Michigan built as much momentum as any team in college football over the last month of the season. Think about what they did from the moment that they were able to flip Bryce Underwood, the #1 recruit in the country. Thank you, Larry Ellison. Then they beat Ohio State. Then they beat Alabama. So in this era where nobody gets to win their last game except for the national champion, maybe the only other team in the country that has real positive sentiment moving forward and into the offseason is Michigan. That to me is just kind of a bonkers thought. Now, are they losing some big names? Absolutely. And everyone's going to be losing some big names next year. Mason Graham, Kenneth Grant, Will Johnson, Colston Loveland, all of those are great players. And in a lot of ways are irreplaceable. However, what we saw against Alabama in that bowl game is without all of their main contributors, even on the defensive side, they were still excellent. This culture at Michigan remains. And it feels like Sharon Moore has leaned into that even more. Think about it. Their defense next year is essentially the defense that we just saw really shut down Alabama and Jalen Milroe. They didn't have Will Johnson, Mason Graham, Kenneth Grant, Josiah Stewart, Makari Page in that game, and yet they were able to go out there and be totally dominant. Wink Martindale figured it out. Now, whether he gets a job moving forward into the National Football League or not, that system is going to remain the same. Remember, this is the third straight defensive coordinator that has run the same exact system that has dominated their opponents. So I trust that defensive structure will maintain. They've been good in the portal on the defensive line. They get Mikey Keene to transfer in at quarterback from Fresno State. He could bridge to Bryce Underwood. That could be interesting. He's got a lot of experience at 34 starts. And the offense can't be worse, folks. I mean, they were 129th in college football in offense. That was their problem. That was their issue. And if they fix that at all, some of these close losses that they had could turn into close wins. They get Justice Haynes, a running back from Alabama, to go with Jordan Marshall, who they really love at running back. Jordan Marshall is a guy that they're very high on. They get Donovan McCulley, who's a guy that at Indiana didn't really make it through into the Cignetti era, but he's a really good player, and I've liked him. And then they avoid Oregon and Penn State next year. Then they get Ohio State and Ann Arbor. They do have a really solid trip to Oklahoma in the non-conference. That's another team, probably lands right there 19 or 20 in the country, and they're going to have one of the better quarterbacks in the country in Pintier. I like what Michigan is doing. I like what Sharon Moore is doing. They're number 10. Okay, we go on to number 9. I've got LSU at number 9. I think this is a critical year, obviously, for Brian Kelly. They've got to show a I don't want to call it dramatic. I would call it significant. They need to show a significant step in the right direction. And I don't think that that's out of the question because they have been active, certainly in the portal, the number one portal class in college football up to this point. They have replenished their wide receiver group and their offensive line through the portal. And then more so than anything, they get Nussmeier back. And you know how I feel about experienced quarterbacks. Whether they're transferring in or they're staying put like Nussmeier at LSU, experienced quarterbacks are running college football. We're seeing that time and time again. We saw it with Penix and J.J. McCarthy 2 years ago in the national championship. We saw it on Monday night with Will Howard and Riley Leonard. These experienced quarterbacks are the ones having all the success, and now LSU is going to have that. So that's huge for them. 5th year in the program. I think the defense has got to be improved, and it should improve. Blake Baker had a good first year as defense coordinator, still needs to continue to grow. They get Harold Perkins back. He's had an up-and-down career after being really good as a true freshman, and then he dealt with kind of the position issue and an ACL injury. Went weeks. He's a tackling machine. He's back. Their injury bug, if they can stay healthy, which they didn't largely last year, then that's going to help. And then they've hit the portal really hard, and I think that their portal additions are going to be huge for LSU. So LSU is in my top.
In half a mile, use the right lane to exit right.
I think that more teams have invested in building out their roster. So what I see now is that you've got a lot of teams that are very similar. Now, there are some teams that I'm going to put up at the top, but I don't think it's a drastic margin. It's not a huge margin between those teams and the teams that are going to be, 6 through 10. But here's the kicker. The difference between the teams that are like, let's say 7 through 10 and 7 through 18, there's like no separation in those teams. I found this to be an incredibly difficult exercise because there are
Exit right to exit 56A, I-635 South, Lyndon B. Johnson Freeway.
difficult exercise because there are a ton of teams that I left off of this top 10 that very easily could be on the top 10. I get it, it's way too early, it's hard to tell. We still have another transfer portal window to go, so we don't even know the exact rosters that we're trying to evaluate here. But I just want that to frame the way that you're listening to the rest of this show and watching the rest of this show, is that we have more parity. We had more parity this season than we've ever had. And next season, I think it's going to be even more so a great amount of parity. So here are some teams that did not make my top 10.
In 1,000 feet, use the left lane to stay to the left. Stay to the left to I-635 South.
That did not make my top 10 that I really struggled with in the not right direction. And I don't think that that's out of the question because they have been active, certainly in the portal, the number one portal class in college football up to this point. They have replenished their wide receiver group and their offensive line through the portal. And then more so than anything, they get Nussmeier back. And you know how I feel about experienced quarterbacks, whether they're transferring in or they're staying put like Nussmeier at
Continue straight for 10 minutes to I-20 West, Lyndon B. Johnson Freeway.
They're staying put like Nussmeier at LSU. Experienced quarterbacks are running college football. We're seeing that time and time again. We saw it with Penix and J.J. McCarthy 2 years ago in the national championship. We saw it on Monday night with Will Howard and Riley Leonard. These experienced quarterbacks are the ones having all the success, and now LSU is going to have them. So that's huge for them. 5th year in the program. I think the defense has got to be improved, and it should improve. Blake Baker had a good first year as defense coordinator, still needs to continue to grow. They get Harold Perkins back. He's had an up-and-down career after being really good as a true freshman, and then he dealt with kind of the position issue and an ACL injury. Went weeks. He's a tackling machine. He's back. Their injury bug, if they can stay healthy, which they didn't largely last year, then that's going to help. And then they've hit the portal really hard, and I think that their portal additions are going to be huge for LSU. So LSU is in my top 10. Big year for Brian Kelly. They're at number 9. Next up is a team that I was high on early last year, and that panned out. And now they've dipped into the same playbook. Miami has gone and gotten a very experienced quarterback, Carson Beck, going to head to Miami, and he's going to be there with the Canes, and I've got them at number 8. He's going to come in to try to replicate in a lot of ways what Cam Ward was able to do this last year. Now, is Beck going to be as good as Cam Ward? I don't know. Ward was sensational in so many ways. Is he going to be a really good option? Maybe not quite Cam Ward, but a very good option? Yes. Yes. And I kept saying this last year with Beck at Georgia, is I never felt like it was completely his fault. The skill position group for Georgia led the country in drops. As a quarterback, like, what are you supposed to do? Put handles on the ball? That's what I used to say to my wide receivers. I think in hindsight, I probably need to issue like an apology apologies for some of the things that I said to my wide receivers. I love you guys. I love you guys. And there were times when, you come back to the huddle and it's like, hey, next time I'll put handles on. And it's like, that's probably me. That's what Beck should have been saying to his Georgia wide receivers. What do you, I'm sorry, where do you want it next time? In your hands or your hands? So is his play going to improve? Probably. He's not going to have to force it as much, and he's going to be playing behind, I think, one of the better offensive lines in the country. That's what Mario Cristobal has done really well, is stockpile talent up front in the line of scrimmage. So that depth should pay off for the quarterback and the offense overall. The defense was a clear and obvious weakness last year, and they went out and they hired Corey Heatherman from Minnesota. I have liked Corey Heatherman a lot. I know that he hasn't been at the top of college football, but I tell you what, man, Minnesota has been a very good defense for a long time. And Corey Heatherman has been one of those guys, along with Joe Rossi and others, that built that defense and did an excellent job for PJ Flack. And here he comes to Miami, and they've also hit the portal to address the defense as well. They brought in several players in the secondary, which they needed. Ruben Bain on the edge, he can be a force, was banged up this past year. Looked great as a true freshman in 2023. I think they'll be strong in the backfield. This is a good team, and they've got 2 really tough non-conference games in September. We're going to find out everything we need to know about Miami early in the season. They're going to host Notre Dame in the opener, and Notre Dame's a team that you'll be seeing upwards in my top 10. And they also host Florida as well. That's a team that, of course, I just told you I consider in the top 10. So a tough first month for Miami, and Beck is going to have to hit the ground running there in South Florida. Number 7, I've got Clemson. Now, to be fair, this was one of the harder ones because I love Clemson and what they're doing. I love the fact that Klubnik is back for his 3rd year as the starter in the same offense. Dabo Swinney is finally, wait for it, dabbling in the portal. Okay, here we go. Clemson starting to dabble in the portal a little bit, so I think that the roster could be a little bit better. And yet, they lost to South Carolina, who I did not include, and Sellers is back for South Carolina. You see the issue. You can go from 7. So Clemson I put at the top of this entire list, and to be very fair, someone could have talked me into Clemson being 15th. That's how close I think 7 to about 18 are. All the teams that I mentioned before I got into the top 10, all of them could be sprinkled into these 4 spots. Now, all the teams in the top 6, I don't think they're drastically better, but they're certainly in the top 6. Okay, so Klubnik is there. 4 or 5 offensive linemen back. Look what they did against Texas, even on the road. And I know they got to the playoff. They won the ACC. The defense was not up to Clemson standard, and now they're going to go out, and I think they'll be improved. Tom Allen comes in. He was the coordinator for Penn State this last year. He was, of course, the former head coach at Indiana, and Tom Allen is a very good football coach. I've enjoyed covering Tom Allen, both from his time as a head coach at Indiana and then last year as a coordinator. He's really good, and he will improve Clemson's defense. I don't think that there's any question in my mind. Despite, I think, a disappointment as a group, there are some pieces there on the defensive side. You've got T.J. Parker, he had 11 sacks this last year. Peter Woods in the interior, he's a good player. Sammy Brown, freshman All-American this last season. So Tom Allen's going to have some pieces. They get Will Holt, the defensive end from Purdue. There was a couple of players for Purdue, all transferred, unfortunately, for Purdue, but they were the real foundational pieces that Ryan Walters was trying to build on. One of those is Will Holt. Max Clare, you're going to see. He's a tight end transferred away from Purdue. He's going to be in this top 10. Ryan Thiedemann, he was a safety for Purdue. He's going to be in this top 10. So a lot of these really quality teams looked at that Purdue roster and went and poached some of that young talent. Their schedule, speaking of Clemson, they open with a home game against LSU. That's going to be great. They're both in my top 10. They don't play Miami in the ACC. They get SMU at home. So I like what Clemson is doing. That's why I've got them at number 7. Okay, let's get into the top 6. Team we saw on Monday night, if they would have won and come back and actually won that game, I would have put them higher, but Notre Dame is at number 6. I love what Marcus Freeman is building. If you listened to the show on Tuesday morning, that post-national championship game recap, you know that I was incredibly high on Marcus Freeman and what he was able to do. Listen, that team was overmatched on Monday night, and yet they battled and they battled and they battled. The culture at Notre Dame is excellent, and the team, I believe, is elite. I will be absolutely shocked if Notre Dame is not back in the college football playoff next year. That's the level that Marcus Freeman is now kind of competing at. He's building something very special. It's not going to surprise me at all if Marcus Freeman is able to win a national championship at Notre Dame if he decides to stay there. I think it's great if he decides to stay there. I would love to see him stay in college football, but I do know that the NFL, maybe not this go round because he just signed that solid extension, but at some point if he keeps winning, the NFL is going to come knocking. There's no doubt. And then the other thing that they're going to have to pay attention to, and I don't want to put this in anybody's head because Notre Dame fans are going to scream at me, but He did play at Ohio State. If and when Ryan Day decides that he wants to move on, that's the first call that any athletic director, it's Ross Bjork right now is the AD at Ohio State. But when there's an opening, their first call is going to be DeMarcus Freeman. Riley Leonard is going to move on from the Irish, obviously. Looks like it could be Steve Angeli, maybe CJ Carr. CJ Carr is the grandson of Lloyd Carr, the legendary Michigan coach who won a national championship in the late 90s. CJ, his grandson, was the top 50 overall recruit this past season, so he'll be in there. This is... I think Miami's going to have a really good offensive line. I think Notre Dame's probably going to have the best offensive line in college football. And they get Jeremiah Love, Jadarian Price back. So
I'd be thrilled to connect with you on Discord if you're interested. My username is Mickey70.
Riley Leonard, I don't know. Will CJ Carr be able to run the football like Riley Leonard? I don't know. But I do know that putting two backs
for finding my channel. I appreciate it.
You see this a lot now. We saw it with Michigan last year. We're seeing it with Ohio State this year en route to a national championship. We can see that with Price and Love. The defense certainly loses some pieces, there's no doubt, but didn't you just get the feeling that the culture and what they're building from a depth perspective was able to weather a lot of storms when it comes to the roster? I mean, this is a team that lost a lot of guys to injury, and yet they were able to still go out there and have a hell of a season. They lose Watts, Cross, Mills, Morrison, Kaiser, a lot of losses. I get it. I'm trusting Marcus Freeman right here. Greathouse is back on the outside offensively. They get that Miami game to start the season. They're going to host Texas A&M. That's the third week of the season. They get a bye in between those two games. So a tough first month for the Irish. They're at number 6.
In today's crazy world, defending yourself might leave you behind bars. That's why over 800
Oregon Ducks. I think, candidly, they could go a lot higher than this. I wouldn't argue. Someone could talk me into them at 2. Someone could talk me into them at 3. Someone could probably talk me into, I keep messing that up, talk me into Oregon at 1, to be candidly. They were the number 1 team in the country this year. They had the best regular season this year. They beat Ohio State at home before running into the Death Star version of Ohio State in the Rose Bowl. They got to replace Dylan Gabriel, but remember, they got his replacement last year in the portal when they got Dante Moore to transfer from UCLA up to Eugene. So now Dante Moore, who has started a bunch of football games as a true freshman for the Bruins, now he's going to be the quarterback, so he's got the experience, and he was able to sit for a year and watch Dylan Gabriel, who started more football games than anybody in the history of college football. And he was able to study under Will Stein.
Alligato 3878 says, I specialize in promoting streamers' channels, driving organic growth of subscribers, followers, live views and active chat users, and seeking verification. As an expert channel promoter, I focus on attracting genuine and engaged audiences to ensure your videos receive consistent viewership and engagement. I will take you affiliated and verified within few days. Message on Discord. Backhand index finger with dark skin tone pointing right. Backhand index finger with dark skin tone pointing right. Backhand index finger with dark skin tone pointing right. Backhand index finger with dark skin tone pointing right. Hunt catch 080.
5-star freshman wide receiver. Oregon's going to be very good, folks. They're going to be very good. From a schedule perspective, they avoid Ohio State and Michigan. So favorable schedule for Ohio State. Tough game at Beaver Stadium against Penn State. That one's going to be their Big Ten opener in September. And then they get teams like Indiana, USC at home. Their road tests are going to be like Iowa and Washington. Getting teams at home, that's huge. They're 38-1 in their last 39 games in Autzen Stadium. So Oregon, in there at 5. Georgia's going to be at 4. Georgia and what they have done from a roster building standpoint is impressive, and that's why they will continue to be in here at number 4. I felt like it was just a down year for Georgia, and yet they navigated the hardest schedule in the country, won the SEC, and they were sitting there in the backup quarterback. So, if we think Georgia is going anywhere, or that this is some sort of a trend in the wrong direction,
In 1,000 feet, use the left 2 lanes to continue on I-20 West.
sorely mistaken. Kirby Smart is far too driven. Let's face it, Bama is on a worse trajectory than Georgia at this point because there's more questions surrounding Alabama and their culture, the new staff, who's going to be their quarterback, than there is questions about Georgia. I don't have a lot of questions for a team that...
Continue on I-20 West, Lyndon B. Johnson Freeway.
If we think Georgia is going anywhere, that this is some sort of a trend in the wrong direction, I think that we would all be sorely mistaken. Kirby Smart is far too...
Continue straight for 15 minutes to exit 467B, I-35 east south toward Waco.
this last season. And Downs is going to have to bring in some new safeties around him. The safeties and that three-safety defense for Jim Knowles was a huge key to their success. Unclear for me at this point if they're going to be able to play the structure which allows Downs to be at his best. Part of the reason that they were so good defensively is that they had so much experience around Downs with Ransom and Hancock out there in safeties that they were able to manipulate their structure at times to allow Downs to be the third player near the line of scrimmage. That was huge for their defensive structure and overall philosophy. Are they going to have that? Probably not, at least early in the year. So that's something to at least pay attention to. Jeremiah Smith, Carnell Tate, and they added the Purdue transfer Max Clare, who I was talking about a little bit earlier. Listen, every single game and every game plan, every week next year has to go through Jeremiah Smith. Has to. They cannot go through periods of a game where he disappears. They cannot do that because they're not going to be quite as dynamic around Smith as what they were this last year. Experienced players like Henderson, Jeffries, and Bobo. Now they're going to be very good players. I'm not saying Henderson are substantial steps down, but he has to go through Smith not just for his production, which is going to have to be there, but also his impact on the defense. You've got to use Jeremiah Smith to impact the defense to open up other areas for all of those less experienced players on the outside. The offensive line is going to return all that interior. They added the two tackles, and they can very well start. They've got a monster game early. The opener against Texas is going to be huge. And you don't see Texas yet on this page one of the top 10, so you know exactly where they're at. They get Penn State at home. Road games against Illinois, I think, is going to be very good. Probably this year's Indiana. And Washington, and of course, they're going to have Michigan. Projected starters up there, probably Julian Sand. I'm not totally sure. Devin St. Clair is a really good-looking prospect, and they're going to have quite a battle there for quarterback. James Peoples, the existing running back. They got C.J. Donaldson, a really good player from West Virginia. You got Smith, Carnell Tate, Uncle Brandon Inniss. You got Max Clare, the tight end, along with Jelani Thurman. So, they're going to be fine, folks. I know a lot of guys are walking out the door, but they're walking out of a building that's loaded with talent. It was the best roster in college football, and not every one of those pieces is walking out the door. The defense will look a lot different, and I can't wait to see what their spring looks like to really get an idea of what that defensive lineup will look like. Number two, only two teams left, okay? Only two teams left. And number two, I'm going Texas. I've got Texas at number two. It's officially March meeting time in Boston. This is so rare in college football. Steve Sarkisian is going to be the benefactor of an incredible amount of patience from a young player in his family. Now, granted, this family has such a unique perspective and the benefit of seeing everything from MVPs of Super Bowls down to college success. So the urgency from the family is there, yes, but it's not a panicked urgency like you would get with most players and families. So what that has led to is patience. Patience. And Arch Manning sat for a couple of years. Even when some of us thought, hey, he might be the better option, he was able to sit and develop and learn for 2 years under
Estimated time in traffic, 9 minutes.
and develop and learn for 2 years under Steve Sarkisian. And now that offense is going to look a little bit different because of his skill set running the football. I'm not saying that they're going to dive into the Vince Young zone read offense of Texas past. No. But I am going to tell you, though, when he can take off and affect the defense scrambling, that's huge. That's huge. That's something that they did not have with Quinn Ewers. This is a team that continues to build their roster with elite level recruiting. You know they're going to do well in the transfer portal. The offense is going to look a lot different. The major question I have, this is a big belief in Arch right now, but the major question I have is that their offensive line was so good. Who's going to be up front? They've got to replace 4 of the 5 offensive line starters. That's going to be the most difficult part. Now they lose Golden and Bond, Gunnar Helm, but Ryan Wingo, he could be a star. He'll be back. They get C.J. Baxter. Remember, they did all of this year without their best running back who got hurt in the offseason. So Baxter being back is going to help an inexperienced offensive line. Let's not forget that in the tool bag for Steve Sarkisian, he was able to produce on the ground with what was an ineffective and young offensive line when Bijan Robinson was at Texas. So that's there, and I don't think it's going to be quite as big of an issue when your quarterback can run and you've got an elite level running back. I don't think it's going to be quite as big of an impact losing some of those offensive linemen as maybe some look at. But I look at this Texas team and I think that they're going to be fantastic. The semifinal rematch in Columbus against Ohio State. They've got to go to Georgia. They've got to go to Florida. Red River. They end with A&M in Austin. Difficult schedule, certainly, but they're going to be right there. I'll be surprised if that's not one of the better teams in the country. And number 1, and this is going to be the number 1 team for the reason that I described before even saying who the team is. There is a clear blueprint in college football that has been now established over the last 2 years. Everything runs in cycles, and right now the cycle is about veteran, experienced players. You got to have them. And it's even more valuable when they come from your own program, when you can bring guys back to
Pothole reported ahead.
when you can bring guys back to your program, and they know the drill and they know the culture, and the culture of the team rests in those core players, you've got something special. That's exactly what happened with Michigan 2 years ago, and they won the national championship. Think of all of those experienced older players that came back, could have gone to the National Football League, didn't, and won a national championship because of that. Same thing happened with Ohio State. They all committed to a cause bigger than themselves. Double-digit guys on that team spurred the draft, said, no, I'm not going to go be a professional. I'm not going to go to the National Football League. I'm going to stay here, and I want to achieve something really special. And something similar to that is happening right now in State College. Penn State is going to be my number one team in my way too early top 10 for 2025. Penn State has gotten better every single year for the past 3 or 4 years. And James Franklin, their team, man, they had every opportunity to win that game against Notre Dame. They are knocking on the door of a national championship, and now they're bringing all of those key pieces back to their team. This is the blueprint. Everybody thinks that it's about the transfer portal because of Judkins and Will Howard and Caleb Downs, but no, the core of the Ohio State Buckeyes were Buckeyes. There's a reason why they were able to weather the storm of adversity of losing to Oregon and Michigan, their rival, and yet still roll through the playoffs and beat 4 straight top 10 teams, all by double digits. There's a reason. What was the reason? Culture, togetherness, chemistry, whatever you want to call it, and however you want to define it, it has to be held with guys that committed there and are Buckeyes or Nittany Lions or Wolverines, or they are there. That's where your culture has to be held, and that's what Penn State is going to have. Drew Aller comes back, Nick Singleton comes back, Katron Allen comes back, Denai Dennis Sutton comes back. You start getting those announcements, and I immediately thought to myself, there's your blueprint. There's your blueprint. Now, are they head and shoulders the best roster in college football, like maybe Ohio State was in the offseason last year? No, not quite. And I do think that this is going to be a grind, because you could talk me into Penn State at 6. You could talk me into Clemson at 18. Like, college football is in an incredible spot right now. I keep saying this. This is the golden age. I think Penn State, in my way too early, is going to be number 1 for the following reasons. Drew Aller has started 29 games now, so he's going to be one of the more experienced quarterbacks in college football. Singleton and Allen have started together since their freshman year. They're now going to be in their 4th year. 4 of 5 starters on the offensive line are back, and they have depth, so they will be able to run the football to death. Year 2 with Andy Kotelnicki, everything that he learned his first year offensive coordinator with Penn State and operating with those specific players is going to pay dividends moving forward. They've got to replace Tyler Warren, certainly, but they've got a former 5-star sophomore, Luke Reynolds. He's a pass-catching tight end, and I think he will maybe not replace Tyler Warren, but certainly be a serviceable option. The wide receiver group has held them back drastically. They did not have a catch against Notre Dame in the national semifinal. That can't happen again. So you've got to increase your level of productivity at the wide receiver position. They got, Kyron Hudson. They got Devontae Ross, a deep threat from the Sun Belt. Hudson comes in from USC. Those are upgrades. Upgrades. Trey Wallace and Amari Evans both hit the portal, so they're not going to be there, and they're going to need to upgrade. I think they need to go and grab another wide receiver potentially in the offseason. And then this defense is a question mark. They've got to replace Tom Allen, their defense coordinator. Abdul Carter, their best player up front. Kobe King, the linebacker. Jalen Reed, KJ Winston, who was hurt most of last year, so that's maybe a little bit neither here nor there. But a huge boost when Denai Dennis Sutton, who's going to be one of the best pass rushers in the country, decides to come back. Zane Durant, he passed on the draft as well, so he'll be solid in the middle of that defensive line. The secondary is going to have Zakeem Wheatley. He's back. He's going to have a few spots to fill, but what do we know about Penn State defensively? They're always elite, and I know and trust that James Franklin is going to make the right hire because he has continued to make the right hire. You know, you think about now for what, 3?
Police reported ahead.
You know, you think about now for what, 3 straight, Brent Pry, and then Manny Diaz, and then Tom Allen. They have succeeded through a series of different defensive coordinators, and nothing suggests, at least to me, that they're going to take a step back. Penn State, they still have to prove one thing to me, and they didn't get a chance to prove that this year. Even in a run to the national semifinal, they never beat a team that they were even with. That was their big chance against Notre Dame, and they didn't do it. They've got to get over that hump. That's going to be the tipping point for James Franklin and Penn State, is getting over that hump of beating someone that they maybe quote-unquote shouldn't, or that they're on equal footing with. And if they do that, then watch out. They're going to have a huge chance to do that early in the year in the Big Ten opener, as Oregon's going to come to town and be there in State College. They're going to go to Ohio State. That's not going to be an easy one, but home games against Indiana, Nebraska, road game at Iowa is a favorable schedule for Penn State. I like a lot of things about the Nittany Lions, and so for those reasons, the Nittany Lions are going to be my number 1 team way too early, top 10 for 2025. All right, just a quick reminder, I already went through this, but next week is a YouTube exclusive, so no audio episodes of the Joel Klatt Show. Get to YouTube immediately. Subscribe to the channel, and then go over there because we've got some great product coming out for you. Our Understanding Football series is dropping next week. 3 different video-only, YouTube-only episodes of Understanding Football. We've got the 27th, the 29th, and the 30th. All of those episodes are dropping. If you want to understand football at a deeper level, please go over there and watch those videos. And then also in the comments, would you leave us comments about what you would like?
Well, if you don't like trucks, you wouldn't like driving right now.
What are the things that you want to know more about in our sport that we all love? We'll be back with an audio episode of the show on February 3rd. Happens to be my wife's birthday that day, so happy early birthday to Sarah. And then my first mock draft. That's coming, folks. That's coming. And that'll be February 12th. February 12th will be my first mock draft, so that's what's going on from a schedule perspective right here with the Joel Klatt Show. Thank you for listening. Thank you for making this our biggest year ever. And here's to an even bigger 2025 with our way too early top 10. Have a great week, everybody.
Watch out. Vehicle on shoulder ahead. And now a word from our title sponsor.
Eyeing retirement? Let us show you how to turn your nest egg into a paycheck with X income tax payments. You've worked hard for 4 years.
Well, Johnny Ryan, it is the best job in the company. They have a young, moldable quarterback, Taylor Rivers, who will be cheap for 4 more years. They've got a totally set receiver core. All young, all outstanding players. They got 4 of the top 72 picks in the coming NFL draft, and they've got more free agent cap room than any other NFL team. And that probably closes the door. Well, it does close the door to Coach Big Ben, Mike McCarthy, on the Bears job. That leaves him maybe pursuing the Saints job, or never pursuing him. And if he doesn't get that one, well, maybe taking that year off. Also, the other coordinator of the Lions, Aaron Glenn, their defensive coordinator, is apparently going to be the next head coach of the New York Jets. He's been on the staff here before, so he's got Cowboy connections. And to my knowledge, he has not talked to the Cowboys about the vacant Cowboy coaching job. Now, if reports are correct, Aaron Glenn's got to deal with the nonsense that the New York Jets have become. Next, all of our quarterback Lamar Jackson is back in the game. So is running back Derrick Henry. John Harbaugh is one of the best coaches in the NFL. The defense is very, very sound. But somehow, they
Left lane blocked ahead.
That's nice.
they just
Crash reported ahead.
Even better.
not win the Super Bowl. The latest, this past weekend's excruciatingly painful defeat to Buffalo. In a knife-twisting ending. Baltimore, they failed on 2 two-point conversions in a 2-point loss. And the last of those failures was a drop by their star tight end, Mark Andrews, when he was wide open. And
We are going to Round Rock, Texas.
And the Falcons?
Welcome in.
No, this wasn't Jack Jerry, who, by the way, owns a piece of DraftKings. Finally,
35E.
part of the episode. What was he thinking? Notre Dame coach Marcus Freeman. I watched last Monday's national championship.
In 1,000 feet, use the right lane to exit right to exit 467B, I-35E south toward Waco.
Monday's national championship game of college football in a major.
Exit right to exit 467B, I-35E south toward Waco.
In a major. After Notre Dame scored on their first drive, massive, more than 9-minute drive, they just took it away. They pounded in 3 first-down touchdowns. They led 21-7 at the half.
Watch out, vehicle on shoulder ahead.
They led 21-7 at the half. Moved that out to 31-7 as the game reached the late third quarter. The game was over, for heaven's sakes. Nobody digs themselves out of a hole after being a national championship game. Well, but there was one very tiny fantasy piece of thinking for Notre Dame. If they could score a touchdown and get a 2-point conversion, that would narrow the lead to 16. And then score another touchdown and get another 2-point conversion, that would narrow it to 8. And then score yet another touchdown and another 2-point conversion, and that would draw them. Yeah, I know. It's funny what happens to your mind when you're playing with the possibility that you don't have any chance of becoming a champion. But then, this fairy tale started.
Continue straight for 40 minutes to I-35 south.
This fairy tale started to slightly take shape. Notre Dame scored a touchdown and got it. Then they've hurried downfield. It seemed to me to be terrible strategy. And they were just a bizarre decision. He went for a short field goal. Really? You've got to tie the game before you can win the game. Even if they make that short field goal, it's 31-19, and you've still got to get the ball back twice and move down the field 2 more times and get 1 2-pointer. Notre Dame's getting 1 2-point conversions. But then, you look at the punchers. Because the field goal kicker, Mitch Jeter, doinked a short field goal, leaving the Irish still down those 16 points. Get the picture. It's like Drew York. But that was the plan. The plan now? Be patient. Get well. Find someplace above 7th in the final standings for West, and be a dangerous team in the playoffs.
Today's episode brought to you by Trade Financial. Retire sooner, never less than. And by Crest Farms. There's good, there's better, and then there's Crest. And by Bob Stevens Release.
Thanks for listening to today's episode of Just Wondering What Mixers. If you enjoyed what you heard, please hit follow, and a fresh new episode will be delivered to you every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And if you know someone who might enjoy our work, please share it with them. I'm Ron Hastings, and I'm always just wondering about something.
And I'm Mary Hitchkus, and I'm just wondering too.
The ins and outs of caring for your home. Out, frustration, putting it off, kicking the can down the road. In, plans and guides that make it easy to get home projects done. Out, carpet in the bathroom. Like, why? In, knowing what to do, when to do it, and Brings episode number 992. That was Bill Curtis. The Bill Curtis. He says you're a big deal. Maybe we are. I don't know. 992, getting so close to episode number 1000. This is for the 20
snowboarding effect in the Gulf Coast. How about that? Mobile, New Orleans, Houston, Lake Charles, Pensacola. We'll talk about this in detail here just a little bit. And I will say I'm wearing my cargo shorts, which I'm afraid to stand up. You have to be sure that your pants are on, and number two, that you're facing anything else. I wear cargo shorts when it's, I think my limit's maybe 10 below zero. If it's colder than 10 below zero, I might put on some long pants. But I have not worn blue jeans in probably 20 years. I just don't wear long pants unless I have to do it for television service. So my cargo shorts. Was buying those at Costco. That's me. Come on. What you need to do is watch the Mike Leach video on cargo shorts. That is the greatest. He gets it. He told me this man understands me. The cargo shorts video is just too good. James A. in Tulsa. How cold are you tonight?
We are going down to 8. It is snowing right now and 24 degrees. It is not my favorite weather.
Okay. Well, yeah, we had that big old snow event here a couple of weeks ago, 10 days ago. In fact, we still had snow in my yard 3 days ago. It's just finally going away now. We got this next one coming in tomorrow. It should be making the south. It's the season. We'll see. Kim, how cold are you in Normal? Where you are?
Yeah, geez, here in Norman, we're 23, I guess, according to the Mesnet. And if James up in Tulsa is getting down to about 8, we're probably going to be 9, 10 degrees here. So, balmy, comparatively. Balmy.
Hey, tropical heat wave. I think our coldest morning here is going to be Wednesday. We'll probably see Huntsville, some of the cities in the Tennessee Valley, maybe a little bit 9. Down here we'll probably do 10 or 12. Bill Murray, let's get this on the road here. We got so much to talk about. We want to talk about the TV thing first, and then we're going to get into Dr. Cosmo here. But I'll let you bring in our esteemed, honored guest.
Tonight, a kind of somber night, James. I always had so many wonderful memories of Chuck Cosmo. When we received the news over the weekend, of course, we were all heartbroken to see his passing. Just a true great in our field. And, of course, Dr. Kim Coco McLean was extremely close to Chuck. And she reached out on Saturday morning and asked if she could invite Dr. L. Brooks and a couple of folks. So, Kim, I'll toss it over to you and let you introduce our good friend Harold and give the disposition of our other guests that we would have loved to have had with us tonight as well. And then we'll kick it back to James after you introduce Harold, because we're going to talk about, we're going to do a little editorial first, and then we can spend the rest of it.
Yeah, we're going to get the editorial out of the way first, then we'll get into Chuck. So, but Kim, let's formally introduce Dr. Brooks.
Then we'll share our thoughts on Chuck.
Yeah, what an appropriate night to talk about Chuck. It feels like we've reached a real benchmark for the field, and his passing happening at the same time as this, it almost seems really fitting. So I'm excited for both things tonight. So tonight, who we do have on the show with us is my good friend, Dr. Harold Brooks, a senior scientist at the National Severe Storms Laboratory here in Norman. And Harold is here to share decades of remembrances about Chuck. I know that his passing is something that maybe hasn't been a surprise to some of us who've been watching when Harold has been in particular very close with him this whole time, but it doesn't make it any easier. So Harold, we're just really grateful that we have you here tonight.
It's good to be here. I mean, this is, gosh, Chuck's why I'm in Norman. I mean, there's just no two ways about it. And, we had offices or desks within, 5 feet of each other for more than a decade. Had lunch together almost every day for a few years, and it's pretty decent work together, and hopefully influence some other things that also worked out well. And there was a lot of non-work stuff. We're both of us had a grandparent born in Sweden. We shared stories about Lundqvist and being forced to eat it as a child.
As one does.
And breaking the generational trauma by not sharing it with our children. But a lot of stuff that went on with Chuck over the years that I think my wife made a comment that when she shared what I had shared the other night on Facebook, she said, "Was it okay that I called him your best friend?" And I'm going, I can't think of any. Post college, I can't think of anybody else I spent more time with, talking and about more stuff than Chuck Cosmo. So it's I know there are going to be times in the next in years when it's like, I wish I could tell Chuck about this and see how he would react when he would let's get on with the show.
Oh, sure. Well, obviously, with that intro, we're all looking very much forward to what you have to share tonight. And I'm glad that Jen has a bunch of clips of Chuck to tee up to mix in with everything. This should be a delight. I will say I tried to get some of the folks that Harold and Chuck were involved with in early lab days. They call
this means. It looks like we're watching the passing. You've been warning about it for years, but we're sort of watching the passing of an industry here in a lot of ways. And how do we move forward from that?
First off, thanks for letting me talk about this up front. I thought we'd get this out of the way because so many people have asked me to comment on this. And I told every one of them, watch the show Monday, watch the show Monday, watch the show Monday, watch the show Monday. So a lot of people are watching. And for those that don't know the situation, so there's a fairly large broadcast television group, Allen Media, and they laid off every single meteorologist, to my knowledge, every one of them, all of their local stations. I want to say they have 20, 21, 22 stations around the country. They have two in my area. They have one in Huntsville, Alabama, one in Tupelo, Mississippi, but they've got them as far north as Wisconsin. They've got some out west, and they're gone. And what they're going to do is have the weather for those stations provided for them from the Weather Channel, which Allen owns. And so it's going to be hubbed out. And so just a few thoughts on the whole thing. And number one, some people are just furious that they feel like those local meteorologists are part of their family. The meteorologists, they've been in their child's school to teach them weather. They have held their hand through violent tornado outbreaks or vicious floods or whatever high impact event for years. And just like that, they're gone. Just like that, they're out of here. And I feel so badly for those that have lost their jobs. I've been so blessed. Most everybody loses their job multiple times if you do what I do for a living. And I've been pretty blessed. And I don't know exactly what it feels like, but I've had some heartbreak in my life personally. And I know that it's traumatic when you lose a job. Just happens out there. And I'm so sorry for those men and women that have lost their positions in broadcast meteorology and that they're not doing the soul searching. What am I going to do? How do I provide for my family? Where do I go from here? Is it over? And I hate that. I just hate that. But having said that, I want everybody to hear this. I'm so positive on the future of what we're going to do. There will be a lot of short-term pain. This is an example of that. But there will be long-term gain, and that the products and services we deliver will still be there on different platforms, but in a much more efficient way. What I had done, I had been on this horse for 47 years. I started doing weather on television. This is how old I am. In June of 1978, June the 26th of 1978, I walked into WCFT, Channel 33 in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. They paid me $1.85 an hour to do the weather. Wait to come to work. When people go home, people that are watching this show, listening to this show, well, what do you watch? You're going to watch Netflix. You're going to watch Hulu. You're going to watch Amazon Prime. You're going to watch YouTube. Most people are watching this on YouTube right now. You don't watch linear television. For years and years, our primetime ratings were 20, 25, 26 shares. In some cases, 40 and 50 shares. And now they're ones and twos. The audience is just tiny. And so that model has gone away. And those that use the traditional Ron Burgundy newscast, they're getting old. Most of them are in their 60s, 70s, and 80s, and they're starting to die. And the bottom line is, we are in a world that are featuring products of a bygone era, and they're going away. And that's okay. It's okay. But for all of us, I think it's a wake-up call that we have to, number one, be cognizant of that. We have to be where people are, and we have to understand how they consume media and provide products and services in that world that they can consume on a regular basis and during high-impact events. And I love this generation. I love this generation that's about to come out of college. And I think they will lead the way in building that new model. So we're not going away. And I'm hoping that for a lot of these men and women that have lost their jobs, they will look at these opportunities. So having said that, I just want people to understand that as horrible as this is, in the long term, I'm excited. Can the Weather Channel adequately do tornado warning coverage, live tornado warning coverage for Tupelo, Mississippi, Huntsville, Alabama? I guess I really don't know until it happens, but I will say this. You cannot do severe weather right unless you understand the people, the culture, the geography, and the microclimate of the market where you serve. And you can't do that from a distance. I could do a tornado outbreak in Nebraska, but I would be horrible at it. I don't understand the people, the culture, the geography. I'm just looking at maps and names. I've never worked an outbreak in Nebraska before. You can't beat that. And I think a hub will not be able to do that successfully. So I think there's always going to be local meteorologists. But I want everybody to understand that I'm positive for the future. Short-term pain, long-term gain. So out of everybody on the show here, James Adelon in Tulsa is in my world. And I have to pitch to him for his thoughts on this because I might have made him mad. He's a lot smarter than I am. So James, what are your thoughts on the Allen Media situation?
I mean, it hit me pretty hard. I mean, we'd like to put in a few more years in this industry. People just starting out, the young people on my team would like to make a career out of this as well. And again, I don't think secret that there may have been financial issues with that company as well. Not saying, I just think money was tight. I think he acquired a lot of stations in a short amount of time, most small, mid-sized markets. One thing that I do fear out of this, for the talent at least, is you've got a lot of small market talent that are out of jobs now because the majority of those stations seem to be in small and low and medium markets. And the Weather Channel will have to staff up a little bit, but I think they're going to select from the cream of that crop. And a lot of these people won't have chances for those jobs. So I know a lot of TV stations, and you've talked about this too, James, in Birmingham, that you have trouble getting people to apply for jobs. And I do too. Thankfully, knock on wood, I won't have to do this for a while. But, this maybe changes that dynamic temporarily, that we have some more people applying to these jobs. I don't know. But I think you're right. We're in a process of change. I know other television station groups understand that local weather is the bell cow of their news product. And I think some of them are struggling to understand the rationale behind this as well.
And let me just say this too. I work for a big company called Sinclair Broadcast Group, and they've been so supportive of me. They leave me alone. They give me the freedom to be me. I walk the beat of a different drummer. I'm an outlier in so many different ways, but they have been so supportive, and they have literally left me alone in order for me to be successful. And they've given me the tools I need to be successful. And understand, this doesn't affect my company at all. I'm here. I've got a great relationship with Sinclair. This is a group called Allen, and I do think you're right, James, and that most likely some advisor told Byron Allen, you need to buy a bunch of these TV stations. And he just got some bad advice. So you borrow a bunch of money, you buy a bunch of TV stations at a time when linear television